Welcome to the 2021 Major Donor Symposium. In this breakout session, How to Convert New Donors to Major Donors, two members of the focus group team, Tom MacAdam and Brian Robinson, will guide you through a more strategic and relational approach to raising the funds that are critical to fulfilling your mission. As you listen to the content, feel free to engage with the Q&A feature where our team members will be standing by to address your questions. Q&A will be available during the session today and for 15 minutes afterwards. For additional resources, including a copy of the slides from this presentation, please return to the breakout session event page after the session to download these resources. This breakout session and the others offered today will be available on demand beginning tomorrow. As we get started, let's kick off our time together by letting everyone know where you're joining from and the organization you are connected with. Please just type that in the chat feature now. Enjoy.
Well, hello and welcome to the session on how to convert new donors into major donors. And my name is Tom MacAdam. I'm a senior consultant with the Focus Group and glad to be with you this morning.
Hey, my name is Brian Robinson and I am the research analyst with the Focus Group. And I work out of our headquarters office in beautiful St. Augustine, Florida. Nice to be with you today.
So today's session, we're going to talk about a couple of things in terms of how to identify the people that you have a challenge finding that are either within and unknown to you within your donor base, or maybe people that you'd just heard about and you'd like to contact. So we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies to identify those people and how to cultivate them into the major donors that you need for your organization. Every organization has the same challenges. I mean, every organization is looking for major donors, but the big question usually is, where do you find these donors? Where do you find the people that you need in order to provide the resources that you need for your worthy mission? The other question is, once you're looking for donors, how do you identify who they are? I mean, how do you determine the characteristics of a major donor and the capacity to be a major donor? In what ways are you able to assess their capacity? How do you determine how much they actually could give? And even then, how do you cultivate them from the first engagement toward a major gift? So the thing most organizations don't realize is that the quest isn't always for a brand new donor. You actually may already have the donors that you need within your organization. Most organizations have people within their audience that are giving at a certain level to what they do, but they're actually either under-realized, under-cultivated, or under-asked. A lot of times a person may come on board with a small gift as a test, and they may see how your organization engages them over time. And after they've built some trust in the organization, they may be willing to give more. So it's very possible that you already have the donors that you need within your support base. This is the problem, though. Most organizations don't really know the capacity of their supporters. They really don't have any idea until they actually meet face to face. And even then, outward markers aren't always an indication of people's capacity to give. And also, some of the people that are already your current donors can help in the process. It may not be that the first approach you make to one of your supporters is to ask them, is there somebody else you could introduce me to? Do you have any friends that maybe you could point my way or give me some contact information for? Instead, sometimes your current donors can give you information about others who support you that they know that'll yield some information about who actually could be a major supporter. But taking back just one step back, I'd like to look with you at the three characteristics that are the markers of a major donor. Most organizations look at capacity. I could name endless organizations, and probably you could too, that will kind of line up every year, sometimes at a certain time of year, at the doorstep of some of the wealthiest people in your community. That's because they only look at one characteristic of a major donor, and that's the capacity to make a major gift. The problem is that there's more to being a major donor than just having the capacity to give a major gift. There are also two other important factors to look at. The second is people that actually are engaged with what you do, inclined to give to what you do, and care about what you do. So the second key ingredient for a major donor is beyond their capacity, their inclination, their affinity with your organization, their love for what you do, their appreciation for your mission. So that's the second characteristic. And the third, people who are generous. You can have two of these elements without the third, and you're not going to see a major gift. For example, you may have someone who loves what you do, has a great deal of resources, but for whatever reason, God just hasn't given them right now the encouragement, the blessing, the vision, or maybe even the trust to make a major gift. They're just not generous yet. And that's not going to result in much. Same time, you could have somebody with great capacity who's very generous, but they really don't care that much about what you do. They may give you a gift out of appreciation for who you are, maybe who you are as a friend, maybe the fact that they just want you to keep going, but they really aren't passionate about what you do. So if this middle factor is missing, you won't have a major gift. And then there's people that you love, they pray for what you do, they're encouraging, they volunteer, so they love what you do, they're very generous people, but they just don't have the capacity. So you really need all three. So we want to focus first on the first element in evaluating capacity. The thing about capacity is you can't always tell from outward appearances or their job titles or what you might see on the surface. I once had a trip to Florida where I visited with two different families. And on paper, if I looked at those two organizations, they actually gave just about the same amount of money, same size gifts, same frequency, and they lived in two different parts of the state. And just because of the way things worked out, I had about a 4.5-hour drive in between these two places. But what I found is when I went to one location, the family lived in a very modest home, in a modest neighborhood. I went inside. A lot of the furnishings in the home were pretty Spartan. Like, it would take a while to describe, but it was very simply furnished. They sat me down in a wooden chair without a cushion and offered me a glass of warm water. I mean, it was very simple. And while we were talking, one of the spouses came in from a busy day at work to join the conversation, put down her keys and sat down, and she was clearly been working hard that day. And they were just riveted with attention on what the organization did that I was serving at the time. And I realized this is a family that's giving so sacrificially, they're probably giving out of their need. And then the second person I visited in another part of the state, for sake of the fact that this is a public forum, I won't describe too many indications, but this person was a very wealthy person and had a great amount of capacity to help. And we toured around their heated garage for collector cars. So the thing is, you can't really tell. Sometimes outward appearances don't indicate what somebody can give. Sometimes they don't indicate their generosity. We'll talk about that next too. And so you also can't tell their capacity based on how they give to your organization. I should comment on that because there are people that will give small gifts to one place and large gifts somewhere else. And that's something we need to look at. How do you assess generosity? Well, to figure out if somebody's generous, you really have to spend time with them. You have to know a little bit about them, but you also have to know them and know about them. But the problem is that you can't meet with everyone. And so one of the things you have to do is figure out, how do you meet with the right people? And then even so, it's sometimes difficult to tactfully uncover their true capacity in a conversation. Sometimes it requires a little bit more, and sometimes it requires a little research. So Brian is our research analyst and our specialist in this area is going to share about a few things that we do at the focus group and that we can encourage you to do as you kind of look at the capacity and other factors that might reveal some things about generosity in your donor base today.
One of the first things is to realize that there's a wealth of publicly available information that can shed light on major donor characteristics, and good research can point you to the right conversations. Now, first, let's talk about some of the things that you can do. We live in a day and age of the internet, and so there's lots of different information out there that's available at no cost to you. And so one of the things that you can utilize, that I'm sure you're already familiar with, is Google searches about your donor. And we'll take a look at that a little bit more in depth here in just a moment. Also, you can discover lots of different things about your donor with their LinkedIn profile as far as their education and their career. And then there's also different places such as county and state websites where you can locate information. Also federal websites, for example, the SEC, better known as EDGAR, where you can search publicly traded companies. Perhaps you have discovered that your donor is on the board of a publicly traded company and you want to find out how much stock they have in that company, you can go to that website and do a search on them and find that information. Perhaps you know that they own a business and you want to know a little bit more about that. You can go to your Secretary of State's website and search there and find the business or businesses that your donor is involved with. And then also there is the county assessor websites where you can locate the property that the donor may own. Now, I do want to mention that every Secretary of State website and every county assessor website is a little bit different. Some provide lots of information, some limited information where you have to purchase some of the additional information that you want. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But as we consider some of the different ways that you can do, let's look at a Google search. And so moving on to the example here that I've chosen. One of the features that I use when I do my research is the all-in-text feature that Google has. And this is very helpful because if you just put in without it, then you have lots of different results that populate in the search. And so I find that it helps me save a lot of time by using the all-in-text feature. And so in our example here, not that I'm a major donor, but I wanted to just show you how this works. And so I put my name, Brian Robinson, and I put it in quotes. And then also I put the one of the organizations that I'm involved with called Assemble Network. And so when you put those two together along with the all-in-text feature, it populates some different results. And in those results there, it brings up the link to Assemble Network that I'm involved in. But then if you scroll down through there, it also has my LinkedIn page. One of the things that we can do that is also very helpful is you can create an alert in Google. And basically what you do is you put in your search term along with your email address. And so let's say, for example, using me as an example again, if you put the search term Brian Robinson Assemble Network in there, and then anytime something populated on Google with those terms in it, then you would receive an email about it. So let's just say that a news story broke about how I received $1 million grant for my nonprofit, and there was an article about that, and it was now available on Google. And so that might be something that you would be interested in so that you could then build a better relationship with me as a donor by knowing that information, maybe congratulating me about that accomplishment. And so the alert is a nice feature that you can use with Google. But moving on, if you would, to the LinkedIn profile. So here is my LinkedIn profile with all of, as you can see, all of my different education that I have, along with my career history and volunteer information. And so, as you know, that's available for most of those who have a LinkedIn profile, so that you can get on there and learn more about your donor. So that is some of the things that you can do on your own. Now, some of the things that we at the focus group can do to help you is a generosity screening, and then also an individual prospect profile that we call a snapshot. Now, a generosity screening can reveal the right people with capacity, and we're going to take a closer look at that here in just a moment. While a snapshot will allow you to identify those with known generosity and confirm other areas of potential or demonstrated interests. What are they aligned with, and what are they volunteering for? But before we dive into that and take a look at these a little bit closer, Tom's going to take a moment and talk about the ways that these research tools can be used. Tom?
So now that you know some of the opportunities that you have to actually take a look at who some of your people with capacity might be and learn a little bit about where else they might be generous, There are also some ways that you can use these tools that we've described in your efforts to cultivate your relationships. But I would say that each of them has a distinct purpose. So for organizations that really want to take a broad look at their donor base in a cost-effective way, that's kind of where you would use a generosity screening. So it's a cost-effective mass evaluation for your larger list. The snapshot, on the other hand, allows an organization to say, we'd like to take a deeper look at some of the people who we already have as supporters and learn a little bit more about them. Other things they're involved in, that they're giving to, that they're passionate about. And so deeper looks for individuals would be a good use for something like a snapshot. Now they could be used together at the same time. Very often our clients will know right in advance. They'll say, there are 10 people we're really curious about deeply, but we'd really like to take a look at all of our support base. And so both could be used at the same time, but they also could be used in sequence. So it could be where first the person does a generosity screening, the organization looks at all of their donors, and as a name emerges from there that may surprise them in terms of the capacity that person appears to have, that might be the time to then learn a little bit more about those top prospects. So those are the sequencing, or either contemporaneous or the sequencing of those two tools in addition to what you can do. Brian's going to share a little bit about the generosity screening and a snapshot so you understand how they work. Here's some examples.
Thanks, Tom. So this is an example. This is a fictitious organization, X&O Ministries. And so this would be the front cover of the generosity screening report. And so what we do is we would take your list of donors and we would run them through a screening. And so let me show you an example of what this would look like. Of course, all of our names on our example here are John and Jane Doe. But if you notice in the far right columns there, we have total giving to your organization, and then we have their net worth and their gift capacity range. Now, what this the generosity screening does is it takes your donor and it looks for all of the property that they are linked to, as well as any business ownership. And so that's where it formulates the net worth amount that you see there. Now, what jumps out right away with this particular generosity screening for this organization is that donor number one has the capacity to give more. If you notice, their total giving is right around $240,000 lifetime giving. Now, that may have been in a one lump sum, or that may have been over a course of 20 years to this organization. But one thing's for certain, if you look at their net worth, it way exceeds what you might have expected to discover. And so in discovering that, you see that this person has the capacity to give much more than what they have currently been giving to this organization. Another thing that we look for in the generosity screening is we look to see the lifetime giving and compare it to what the screening says they have the capacity to give, and see if those match up. And so in this particular example, donors number 69, number 70, and number 71, they've given a lifetime amount that exceeds what the gift capacity value is indicating, which seems to indicate that perhaps they may have more wealth than the generosity screening is providing us. Now, this can occur sometimes because sometimes a donor will list property that they own in the name of an LLC. And they may use a different mailing address for those properties than the mailing address of their own personal home or even their business. And so sometimes when we do the generosity screening, it doesn't link all of those together. And so that's where you may find some discrepancies, where you look at the donor and you see how much they've given to your organization, and you look at the gift capacity and you say, boy, those don't match. There seems to be that there should be some more wealth somewhere. So that's when we would then take those donors, the one from the previous slide that you saw, who had given a certain amount, who definitely has the capacity to give more, and then these donors who have given more, and then it doesn't really match the gift capacity. And so then we would dive a little bit deeper into what we call a snapshot. And so I just wanted to go through and take a moment and talk a little bit about the snapshot reports that we conduct here at the focus group. So one of the first things that we want to do with our snapshot is we want to make sure that we provide you as much of a summary about the donor to help you better understand the donor. Sometimes you may already know this information. There are other times that we've discovered that we provide information that our client does not already know about the donor. And so one of the things that we provide here in the summary is their age, whether or not they're married, how many children they have. Sometimes we're able to provide the names of those children. And then also we look for their education, and we talk about their career that they have been involved in, as well as nonprofit boards that they may be a part of, or also on the boards of any other public or private companies. And then we also try to find as much as we can about each donor. Sometimes we find more about the husband than we do about the wife. Other times we find more about the wife than we do about the husband. But the summary is basically just to give you an idea about the person's background. Then we move on to the next section, which is the on the left there, you see the giving capacity. This particular donor has the estimated wealth of $25 million and higher, which throws him into the major giving capacity of 1 to 5 million, and then the giving capacity value, which usually is based upon around 10% roughly of their total assets. And so this individual falls around the 4.5 million giving capacity value. And so off to the right there, you see the wealth summary. And so then we list their total real estate. This individual was on the board of a publicly traded company, and so he has securities. Then also he worked for a publicly traded company, and so we were able to find his income and provide that as well to give his total assets of around $45 million. So then we break it down to the real estate and show that, and then the securities as well. In the next section of the snapshot, we talk about again, the income compensation we provide include the giving to your organization. But then we list all the philanthropic giving that the donor has. This is just a small portion for this particular donor. And this particular donor had lots of more organizations that he had given to. But just to show you an example of a couple of those, we see that he has a heart for ministries to the disabled and organizations with art programs. And then finally, one of the things that we provide is called the extended relationships. Now, this lists all of the different people on the boards that he's involved in. And why we do this is because you may know somebody on that board that you have a better relationship with than the donor that you're researching. So in this particular example, Sharon Doe. Maybe you know Sharon Doe really, really well. And with that relationship through Sharon Doe, you may be able to build a better and closer relationship with the donor that you're researching. And then in the end of the each snapshot, we provide all of the different sources where we find the information. So that way, if you want, you can go back later and read through those articles, because we don't include every single detail about the donor in the snapshot. And so you may be able to read through those articles and discover some other things about them that could help you build a better relationship with your donor. So now that you have this information, the question is, what do you do with it? And so I'm going to turn it back over to Tom, and he's going to explain how developing major donors is a science and an art.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for going through that. Well, obviously, there's a lot that you can do. There are things that we can do to help you. But the bigger goal for you is really getting to know your donors, understanding their capacity, understanding their generosity, understanding a little bit about what matters to them. So when you're developing major donors, there is an art context or an art dimension of the relationship, but there's also a science to major donor development. The science piece is, who are these people? So we've talked a little bit about the science. Who are they? The next question, though, is after I've identified a potential major donor, here's where the art comes in. How do I cultivate them toward a major gift? So the first step of that obviously is evaluate where you are in the relationship. So ask yourself some questions about each of these people, how have you connected with them in the past? What has been the best way to reach them? I know people in the city of Chicago who are in the trading industry, and I might be lucky to get a 6-word, uncapitalized, unpunctuated text message back from them. They're in such a hurry. They're moving real time. They don't have time for lunch. They almost don't even have time for a phone call. Obviously, I want to get past the 6-word text message, but there are people that the best way to connect with them might be a text message at first. That could lead to something else. Other people, they want relationship. They want to spend time with you. That's great because face-to-face conversations are really some of the best. But think about each of these major donors. What's the way you've connected best with them in the past? Also, this is actually not on the slide you're looking at, but one of the things you want to think about is how do I get both spouses, if they're married, to that conversation? So whatever the mode is, see if you can include both of the people making those giving decisions in the family. But think about the mode of communication you've had and leverage that. The second thing to ask is, where and when was your last contact? What's the status? What happened last time? Where was it? What was discussed? How did you leave things off? So think about the status of your relationship as you cultivate them. And then think about what their attitude is toward your organization. What is it about your organization that they're actually particularly passionate about? So years ago, I worked at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. And Moody had Moody Publishing, where they produced amazing resources. And some of those were like everything from devotional materials to Christian fiction to theological works. So even within publishing, there were different things. Then they had Moody Radio, an online and also terrestrial radio network across the country. And that was another dimension of their ministry. And then they had the Bible Institute, where they're training future pastors and church planners and missionaries and music and worship leaders and all kinds of people for service. So it's an educational mission. And then they had a seminary on top of that. So in that organization, I had to figure out what is the interest? What is their level of interest in the organization? What parts about the organization particularly excite them? And then I had to determine that was the basis on which I would communicate with that person as I engage them. And the other thing is, thinking back on that last conversation you had, when it happened, where it happened, what you discussed, what was the result? What's the status of that relationship today? Where did you leave things off, as I mentioned earlier? So did it result? It should result, actually. Every meeting should result in the next meeting. So what was the result of that meeting? Where are you set up right now for the next stage of the relationship process, which we'll talk about in a minute. So that's what the major gift cultivation process really involves 4 general steps. Some of them, particularly this first step, can take a few, there are a few meetings you might have with someone during this stage, but I guess I would consider them stages rather than steps. So the first stage of the conversation for a major gift is just a casual conversation. This is like where you meet somebody for the first time, or maybe it's been a while since you talked to them, or maybe the last time you didn't really prepare them for the next step you were going to take. So you're really at the stage of still cultivating through casual conversation. So this is where you might meet with your major donor prospect, discuss a little bit about the mission. But first, I would start off by building some relational context, things you know about them, things you discussed last time, checking in on their family, checking in on their business, talking a little bit about you as they ask you, and they will ask you questions about how you and your organization are doing. So building the relationship. And that conversation then leads to what you've been doing lately. And usually that's some conversation about the mission and the vision for your organization, progress you've made, that kind of thing. But that's the only context for this casual conversation. What it does, though, is it allows you to ask the question. And just keep in your mind that every meeting ends with some ask. It's just not always an ask for a gift. But it ends with a question. Could we meet again so I could show you a little bit more about what we do? Or maybe so that I could have you come and see what we do. So this could be, let's say in my example, I used a higher education institution. I'd love to bring you to campus and show you a little bit about those things we discussed. Maybe meet a few of the students, talk to 1 or 2 of the professors in that area. If you're a rescue mission in a major city or any city, really, I mean, you could come down, serve a meal, get involved, tour the facility, see what's going on. Now, for international organizations, and we serve a number of those, It's a little trickier. Some of them, you might say, hey, next time we meet, I'd love to pull somebody up on a Zoom call and let you hear from somebody in Nigeria about what's really happening over there. Or maybe it would be next month, someone's coming from Hong Kong, and I'd love you to join with me and have coffee and just hear from them personally what's happening out there in the field. So the come and see or the stage isn't always a tour of a facility or a local organization, but it could be some other vision step. And at the end of that, there's an ask as well. This ask leads to the ultimate ask for the gift. So at the end of that conversation where you're sharing about vision, you'd then be asking them to take that next step, which would be, next time we meet, I would love it if I could share with you a little bit more about our plans and our vision for how we're going to move this effort that we're involved in forward in the coming year, 2 years, or in this upcoming campaign. So the conversation then leads to actually discussing what we call the case statement. And the case presentation is actually presented to the person in a context where they know they're not going to be asked or pressured for a gift, but you've already told them you'd like to sit down with them and actually share with them a little bit about your vision and your plans for the upcoming period of time, whatever it is. That conversation can end with the fulfillment of the promise that although you showed them your vision and you showed them how much it's going to cost, you're not expecting them to make a gift decision today. You just simply promise to tell them a little bit about the vision. But then the ask is, could I follow up with you maybe in a week, maybe next week or the week after to talk to you about a gift? And usually the person will say yes. And then when the asking conversation happens, nobody's uncomfortable. It's not a surprise, but these are the stages. So this is the art and kind of the process of asking for that gift that flows out of the research that you've already done and your engagement of the right people. So we talked about the casual conversation. It's a listening and learning exercise. If you think of it that way, it will take a lot of the pressure off. But it is the foundation for your major gift. And the research is going to help you. It's going to help you figure out the right people to talk to, as we mentioned, but also some of the right information. So as Brian was sharing, as you've done your research, and if we're helping you do deeper research into somebody, you're going to know a lot more about that person. So you're going to remember that that person in Brian's example received the Barney Fife Scholarship to his institution of higher education. And you might realize that that's a scholarship that's for people who are particularly interested in an area of study. So now you want to maybe delve into that a little bit, and maybe there's some alignment between that and what you do in your organization. So that information is going to arm you for that casual conversation. So although it's supposed to be comfortable, you actually have a lot of information in the back of your mind. And you also make sure it's in the right context. So the research can help you identify also ways to enter the world of a donor. One of the things we tell people is that it's important for you to find ways to enter their world. I've heard stories of people that have gone to watch a high school wrestling match, and they are not a fan of wrestling, but it's really important to that donor. So they go to the meeting, they go to the meeting at the wrestling meet, and they learn a little bit about wrestling. But what they find out is that as you come alongside somebody in something that matters to them, they're encouraged, and you actually are meeting them in a place that actually is comfortable for them. It could be that they serve somewhere as a volunteer. Could be they want to work. I have a contact from years past who owns a company that makes a device I can't even describe in this session. It's kind of technical, but it's a device that apparently regulates the flow of liquids into different, chemical equations. So some of it could be water treatment plants, some of it could be chemical plants, but this is the passion and the focus of this organization, and it goes back several generations. So I was able to go with that person on a tour of that facility, and the pride that gentleman shared with me as he walked down the halls and showed me the picture of his father and the first days of the organization, then back into the automated sections that used to all be manual, and showed me the robotic devices, and shook the hands of some of his foremen in his assembly area. That was actually really meaningful to him because I actually entered his world. So learning about your people can tell you ways that you might be able to enter their world. It also can tell you ways that the donor may be able to experience your organization. So have they served as a volunteer somewhere else? Are there ways in which the things that you do would resonate with them? So you can find out a little bit about their interest and ability to experience and engage with you. And also the areas of your ministry that will resonate. So in my example, was it radio, reaching people across the United States with Christian radio programming for Moody Bible Institute? Was it education and development of the future missionaries who want to go to the mission field but won't have to pay tuition and take out loans for their education because of this donor support of Moody Bible Institute? Or could it be that areas of your ministry that would resonate would be something like publications or resources you provide? So these kind of things will come out of your cultivation of people. You'll be able to find out what fits their passions. You'll be able to figure out what they're giving to right now in your organization, and if there are better aligned opportunities within what you do that are going to match that donor's interests. And also, lastly, research is going to help you to be able to ask for the right amount. At the focus group, we talk about asking people, most people, for a range of gift. And we want to see people stretched and grown in their generosity. We want to see you have the resources that you need for your organization. But at the same time, we don't want people to be asked for gifts that they can't possibly give and then disappointed when they give what they think is a generous gift. Instead, we want to ask people in a range of gift, usually, from a level that we think they probably would give to a level that they might possibly consider. And so the research is going to help you figure out how to do that so that your donors can give generously and with joy to what you do. So before we go to your questions, and we really do want to have some questions from you that we can answer, because a lot of times the things you're experiencing are going to be a benefit for others to hear. And sometimes there are some really interesting pieces that come out of those things. But first, I want to have Brian share a success story for how research actually set the foundation for a major gift for one of our clients.
Thanks, Tom. One of our clients recently shared with us after taking our counsel and then allowing us to do research for them, which included a generosity screening and snapshots on 40 of their top donors, allowed them to first build a better understanding of their donors, but then it also gave them the confidence that they needed when they approached the donors for a gift. And I recently received from them an email that informed the focus group that one donor in particular, who had been a casual donor up to this point, recently committed to giving $500,000 to their organization, which was a much needed gift for what they were trying to accomplish with their mission at their organization. So that's just one of the success stories that we often hear that comes from when a client follows our counsel and then the research that we provide for them.
So at this point, I think it'd be best for us to just open it up for some questions for those of you that are here, that are available. I know a number of you are listening online, but we're happy to kind of respond to some of the things that might be challenges in your organization in identifying and cultivating the right people to be major donors for the mission that you have.